Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of Mining Station Delta 7, watching the massive Vexari warships patrol the asteroid belt that was once Earth's orbit. Their crystalline hulls refracted starlight in mesmerizing patterns. Beautiful, if you could forget they were the same ships that had shattered humanity's homeworld into cosmic debris. Still contemplating the view, little ape. The harsh voice of Overseer Kexixi cut through her thoughts. Sarah kept her expression carefully neutral, her hands clasped behind her back in the posture of submission the Vexari demanded from their primitive servants. Just ensuring the mining quotas are being met, Overseer, she replied softly, her eyes downcast as expected. The latest shipment of quantum crystals will exceed expectations. The Vexari's multifaceted eyes glittered with amusement. Their species resembled elegant insectoids, with iridescent carapaces and movements that seemed to flow like liquid metal. They considered themselves the pinnacle of evolution, and humanity nothing more than clever animals to be tamed and put to work. At least you apes can be trained. Kexixi chittered, mandibles clicking in what passed for their species' laughter. Though I must admit, you've proven more adaptable than expected. Perhaps in a few thousand years, you might even approach civilization. Sarah forced herself to laugh politely at the insult, though her fingers itched to activate the neural disruptor hidden in her sleeve. Not yet. The Resistance had spent 15 years infiltrating every level of Vexari society, playing the role of docile servants while gathering intelligence and stealing technology. Patience had become their greatest weapon. You honor us with your guidance, Overseer, she murmured, using the formal phrase that was expected. Kexixi seemed pleased by her submission and moved on to inspect other parts of the station. Once alone, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Vexari's greatest weakness was their absolute certainty in their own superiority. They never questioned why humans had adapted so quickly to their technology, learning to operate and maintain complex systems that should have been beyond their primitive minds. They never wondered why their servants were so eager to work in sensitive areas like weapons development or quantum engineering. Her neural implant, disguised as a simple worker's ID chip, pulsed with an encrypted message from Resistance Command. The final pieces were falling into place. Humanity had spent years reverse engineering Vexari technology, making improvements the supreme species never imagined possible. They had hidden quantum computers in plain sight, disguised as religious trinkets the Vexari found amusingly primitive. They had built a network that spanned the Empire, connecting every human slave through coded messages that looked like routine maintenance data. Sarah made her way through the station's gleaming corridors, passing other humans who kept their heads down and their expressions carefully blank. But she saw the hidden signals, a particular way of walking, a specific gesture while working, subtle signs that identified fellow Resistance members. They were everywhere, gathering data, planting devices, waiting for the signal. In her private quarters, a sparse cell befitting her status as a well-trained ape, Sarah accessed the latest intelligence reports. The Vexari were planning their millennial celebration, a massive gathering of their species' leadership on their homeworld. They would congratulate themselves on building the greatest empire the galaxy had ever seen, never suspecting that their slaves had already seeded their world with weapons of their own design. The humans had learned from Earth's destruction. They had studied the quantum resonance technology the Vexari used to shatter planets, and they had improved upon it, made it more elegant, more precise, and most importantly, completely undetectable to Vexari scanning systems. A message from Dr. Maya Patel, their chief scientist, confirmed the final calculations. The quantum cascade they had designed would not simply destroy the Vexari homeworld. It would create a chain reaction through their empire's quantum network, burning out their technology from within. 15 years of careful preparation, of playing the fools while building something far more advanced than their masters could imagine. Sarah sent back a single encrypted acknowledgement. The Resistance was ready. The Vexari would learn too late that they should have heeded Earth's old warnings about humanity's capacity for innovation and revenge. They had called humans apes, laughed at their primitive ways, never realizing they were watching evolution in action. Soon, they would understand exactly how dangerous a cornered species could become. The last laugh would belong to the apes after all. And in the void where Earth once orbited, the Vexari warships continued their patrol, their crystalline hulls gleaming with reflected starlight, while beneath their feet, the revolution quietly counted down to zero. Dr. Maya Patel's hands moved with practiced precision across the quantum interface, her movements deliberately slow and clumsy, just as the Vexari expected from their primitive workers. The crystalline laboratory hummed with energy as she calibrated the latest weapons system, supposedly under the supervision of lead engineer Zixtal. The Vexari engineer barely glanced at her work anymore. After all, she was just following the simple procedures they had programmed into the ape-friendly interfaces. What Zixtal didn't know was that Maya had rewritten those interfaces years ago, adding layers of complexity that no Vexari would ever think to look for. Fascinating, isn't it? Zixtal's voice carried that familiar tone of condescension. How the quantum resonance creates perfect harmonic patterns. Though I suppose such concepts are beyond your comprehension. Maya nodded meekly. The lights are very pretty, Engineer Zixtal. She had 3 doctorates from Earth universities and had made breakthroughs in quantum mechanics that would have revolutionized human science if the Vexari hadn't arrived first. Now she played the role of an idiot savant, capable of following instructions, but supposedly unable to understand the principles behind them. Her neural implant pulsed with an encrypted message from Commander Chen. The quantum cascade device was ready. They just needed the final piece of the puzzle. Maya's real work wasn't maintaining Vexari weapons. It was studying their fundamental weaknesses. She had discovered it 2 years ago, buried in the quantum harmonics that powered their entire civilization. The Vexari had built their empire on quantum technology, connecting everything through a vast network of entangled particles. It was elegant and incredibly efficient, but it had a fatal flaw, one they had never noticed because they considered it a feature, not a vulnerability. The quantum network was self-propagating, automatically connecting new Vexari technology to the empire-wide grid. They saw it as a triumph of engineering, a way to maintain perfect synchronization across their domain. Maya saw it as a delivery system for humanity's revenge. "You may proceed with the maintenance cycle," Zixtal announced, mandibles clicking in boredom. "Try not to damage anything with your clumsy hands." Maya bobbed her head in acknowledgement, shuffling to the maintenance bay where rows of quantum cores pulsed with ethereal light. Other human workers moved around her, each playing their own role in the carefully choreographed deception. They had turned their forced labor into an advantage, using their access to study and modify Vexari technology, while appearing to simply maintain it. In a hidden subroutine that looked like routine diagnostic data, Maya accessed the quantum network's true capabilities. The Vexari thought humans could only use their technology in the most basic ways, but they had never understood how quickly humanity could adapt and innovate. While they laughed at their servants' primitive nature, those servants had been silently building something new within the quantum network itself. Her implant chimed again. A message from Dr. James Rodriguez in the Xenobiology Division. He had confirmed their calculations about Vexari physiology. The quantum cascade wouldn't just destroy their technology. It would resonate at frequencies that would overwhelm their crystalline-based nervous systems. They had engineered a weapon that would be devastating, but not immediately lethal, giving the Vexari time to understand exactly how thoroughly they had underestimated humanity. Maya sent the final calculations through the resistance network, disguised as maintenance logs. 15 years of scientific advancement, achieved in secret while pretending to be barely more intelligent than animals. The Vexari's own arrogance had given humanity the perfect cover for their work. She allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction as she watched Zixtal leave the laboratory, already dismissing his primitive workers from his mind. The Vexari had destroyed Earth because humanity had refused to submit, to acknowledge their inherent inferiority. They had thought breaking humanity's spirit would make them perfect slaves. Instead, they had created the architects of their own destruction. Every human who worked with their technology had contributed to its subtle modification, adding hidden functions and backdoors that would activate simultaneously when the signal was given. The quantum cascade would transform their entire network into a weapon against its creators. Maya completed her maintenance cycle and headed to her quarters, passing through corridors filled with humans going about their assigned tasks. Each one carried the same hidden knowledge, the same quiet certainty. The Vexeri had taught humanity about quantum harmonics, thinking they were giving simple tools to simple creatures. They would learn, in the end, that humanity had surpassed their teachers, that every moment of submission had been a chance to study, to improve, to prepare. The stars might be silent now, but soon they would ring with the sound of an empire's fall, orchestrated by the very apes they had thought too primitive to fear. The Vexeri capital world of Crystallos gleamed like a massive jewel in space, its cities formed from living crystal that grew in perfect geometric patterns. Security Chief Marcus Wong walked through its pristine streets, head bowed and shoulders hunched in the posture of submission that had become second nature to all human servants. He was part of the advance team, preparing for the millennial celebration that would bring the Empire's entire leadership to one location. The Vexeri had chosen him for his simple but reliable nature, a human who had proven himself capable of following basic security protocols without questioning them. If they had bothered to check more thoroughly, they might have discovered his past as one of Earth's top cybersecurity experts. But the Vexari never looked too closely at their servants' histories. Why bother? They were just apes, after all. The delegation from the Outer Rings arrives tomorrow, his supervisor, Security Director Yexba, announced during the morning briefing. Try not to embarrass us with your primitive confusion. The protocols have been simplified for your limited understanding. Marcus nodded meekly, accepting the data crystal containing his assignments. The Vexeri security systems were impressive. A quantum-linked network that could detect any unauthorized technology or weapons. What they couldn't detect were the modifications humans had made to their own neural implants, turning the simple worker ID chips into sophisticated computing devices that appeared completely innocuous to Vexeri scans. As he made his routine security sweeps, Marcus was actually mapping the Crystal City's defensive grid. Every checkpoint he passed, every scanner he maintained, provided crucial data that was transmitted through the Resistance network. The humans had spent years studying how Vexeri security worked, not to break it, but to become part of it. His neural implant pulsed with updates from other Resistance members. Rachel Torres, posing as a maintenance worker in the Central Power Distribution Hub, had finished installing the modified quantum resonators. David Chen, working in waste management, had mapped the underground utility tunnels that would serve as emergency evacuation routes. Every human servant in the capital was a piece in their elaborate plan. Worker Wong, a crystalline voice chimed. Marcus turned to find himself face to face with High Commander Kexpa, one of the Empire's most decorated military leaders. You will assist in securing the Grand Assembly Chamber. This one is honored to serve, High Commander, Marcus replied, using the formal phrase that the Vexeri found so amusing coming from primitive lips. They loved how humans had adopted their ceremonial language, seeing it as proof of their success in civilizing the species. The Grand Assembly Chamber was a marvel of Vexari architecture, a massive crystalline dome that could hold thousands. Marcus shuffled through his security checks, carefully maintaining his facade of simple competence while his neural implant recorded every detail of the chamber's quantum security grid. The Resistance had known this celebration was coming. They had spent years preparing for it, maneuvering their people into position throughout the capital. The Vexeri would gather their leadership here to celebrate their dominion over the lesser races, never suspecting that those same races had turned their city into an elaborate trap. During his lunch break, Marcus huddled with other human workers in their designated eating area. To Vexeri observers, it looked like simple creatures taking comfort in each other's presence. In reality, they were exchanging crucial updates through their neural network. The quantum cascade initiators are in place, Rachel reported quietly, disguising the conversation as idle chatter. Dr. Patel's calculations were perfect. The resonance will spread through their entire network. Evacuation routes are prepared, David added. When the cascade hits, we'll have 18 minutes before the crystal structures begin to destabilize. Marcus nodded, taking another bite of his simple worker's ration. The security grid is mapped. Once the cascade begins, their own defensive systems will amplify the effect. He paused, looking around at his fellow resistance members. Is everyone prepared for what comes next? They all knew what he meant. The quantum cascade wouldn't just destroy the Vexaries' technology. It would crystallize their neural pathways, trapping them in a state of conscious paralysis. They would be aware as their empire crumbled, as their perfect crystal cities shattered. It was a terrible weapon, but one born from 15 years of oppression and the memory of Earth's destruction. They gave us no choice, Rachel said softly, voicing what they all felt. They thought breaking our world would break our spirit. Instead, it just showed us what we're capable of. Marcus returned to his security rounds, each step bringing them closer to the moment of revelation. Soon, the Vexari would learn that they had made a fatal mistake. They had looked at humanity and seen only apes playing with tools they couldn't understand. They had never wondered why those apes learned so quickly, adapted so easily, worked so diligently with technology that should have been beyond them. The crystal cities of Christos caught the light of its sun, creating rainbow patterns that danced across the streets. Beautiful and perfect, just like the empire they represented. But beneath that perfection, the apes were about to demonstrate just how far they had evolved. The celebration would begin tomorrow, and in its wake, the galaxy would never be the same. The day of the millennial celebration dawned on Christos, its binary suns casting double shadows through the crystalline spires. Inside the Grand Assembly Chamber, Commander Sarah Chen stood at her assigned post, watching as the Empire's elite filed in. Their iridescent carapaces sparkled with status markings, each Vexari trying to outshine their peers. Her neural implant hummed with constant updates from the Resistance Network. Every human servant in the capital was in position, their roles in the coming chaos carefully choreographed. Dr. Patel's voice whispered through the secure channel. Quantum resonators at full capacity. Cascade sequence primed. Sarah watched as High Commander Keksva took the central podium, mandibles clicking with pride. Today, we celebrate not just our empire's millennia of achievement, but our success in civilizing the primitive species who now serve us so faithfully. The assembled Vexari chittered in amusement as the High Commander gestured to the human servants scattered throughout the chamber. Sarah kept her expression carefully blank, though her heart raced. After 15 years of planning, of playing the obedient slave, the moment had finally arrived. Observe how well they have adapted to their proper place, Keksva continued. Even the destruction of their homeworld proved beneficial, teaching them the futility of resistance. Now they serve as a model for all primitive species who would oppose the natural order. Marcus Wong's voice came through the neural net. Security grid lockdown. They've activated all defensive measures. It was exactly what they had planned for. The Vexari's own security systems would help propagate the quantum cascade throughout their network. Let this celebration stand as proof of our supreme. Keksva's speech cut off as the first phase of the cascade activated. To Vexari sensors, nothing seemed amiss. Their quantum network was operating at optimal efficiency. But through their neural implants, the humans could see the change spreading through the crystalline architecture of the city. Dr. Patel's voice was steady, cascade reaching critical resonance in 3, 2, 1. The effect was subtle at first, a slight shimmer in the crystal walls, a barely perceptible change in the quantum harmonics that powered the Empire's technology. Then the Vexari began to notice. Their movements became jerky, uncertain, as the cascade affected their crystalline neural pathways. What is happening? Kextwa's mandibles clicked in confusion as his legs began to lock up. Around the chamber, other Vexari were experiencing the same symptoms, their perfect coordination failing as the cascade rewrote the quantum fields that their biology had evolved to depend on. Sarah stepped forward, straightening from her submissive posture. Around the chamber, other humans did the same, shedding the mask of subservience they had worn for so long. "You should have studied Earth's history more carefully," she announced, her voice carrying through the suddenly silent chamber. "Humans have a long tradition of learning from our conquerors, and then surpassing them." The Vexari's natural crystalline armor, usually a source of pride and protection, was now working against them. The cascade spread through their neural networks, leaving them conscious but immobile, forced to watch as their presumed inferiors took control. "Impossible," Kexva managed to click out as his body crystallized. "You're nothing but primitive apes. That's where you made your mistake," Dr. Paddle said, stepping up beside Sarah. "You saw what you expected to see. Simple creatures playing with technology beyond their understanding. You never questioned why we learned so quickly, adapted so easily. You were so convinced of your superiority that you handed us the tools of your own destruction." Through their neural network, Sarah could see the cascade spreading beyond the capital, following the quantum pathways that connected the Empire. On every Vexari world, in every facility where humans had been forced to serve, the same scene was playing out. The Empire's own technology, modified over years of patient work, was becoming its undoing. "Secondary resonance confirmed," Marcus reported. "All evacuation routes clear. 18 minutes until crystal destabilization begins." Sarah looked out at the paralyzed Vexari leadership, seeing the dawning comprehension in their multifaceted eyes. "You destroyed our world to teach us submission," she said quietly. "Instead, you taught us evolution, how to adapt, how to survive, how to turn weakness into strength. Now you'll have time to consider the cost of underestimating primitive species." The crystal walls of the Grand Assembly began to sing with harmonic resonance, a prelude to their coming destruction. The humans moved efficiently through their evacuation plans, their years of preparation paying off as they secured key facilities and gathered vital data. In orbit, hidden quantum signatures began to pulse through the Empire's network, carrying the cascade to every corner of Vexari space. The Empire that had stood for a millennium was about to learn that evolution favored not the strongest or most advanced, but those most capable of adaptation. And humanity had evolved far beyond what their conquerors could imagine. 3 days after the quantum cascade, Sarah Chen stood in the remains of the Vexari High Command Center, watching the crystal cities slowly crumble. The once perfect geometric patterns were dissolving into crystalline dust, taking with them a millennium of imperial dominance. "Final evacuation numbers confirmed," Marcus reported, his neural implant syncing with the resistance network that now controlled what remained of the Vexari quantum grid. "All human personnel cleared from affected zones. Crystallization of Vexari neural pathways is holding at 99% efficiency." Dr. Patel's hologram appeared beside them, projected from one of the few remaining functional terminals. "The cascade has reached the furthest imperial outposts. Their entire civilization is in stasis, conscious, but unable to move or communicate, except through basic eye movements." Sarah walked to the observation deck where she had once stood as a slave, looking out at the changing landscape. The Vexari's crystal technology had been beautiful, but it had been built on arrogance and cruelty. Now that same technology had become their prison. Message from the medical team. Rachel Torres reported through the neural net. "We've confirmed that the crystallization process is stable. They'll survive in this state indefinitely, just as we calculated. They'll have plenty of time to reflect on their choices. It was a punishment that matched their crime. Just as they had forced humanity to watch their world die, now they would watch helplessly as their empire transformed into something new. But unlike them, humanity had chosen not to destroy, only to reshape." "Begin Phase 2, Sarah ordered. Throughout the former empire, human resistance cells activated the secondary programs they had hidden in the quantum network. The crystalline structures that housed the paralyzed Vexari began to reform, creating sustainable containment systems that would preserve them while preventing any possibility of retaliation. Quantum reconfiguration at 30%, Dr. Petal reported. The network is accepting our new commands perfectly. All those years they spent teaching us to maintain their technology. They never imagined we would understand it well enough to completely redesign it. In orbit, the great Vexari warships hung silent, their crews trapped in crystalline stasis. Human engineers were already at work, studying the vessels that had once destroyed their world. Not to copy them. Humanity had already developed better technology in secret, but to ensure they could never be used for conquest again. Message from the Provisional Council, Marcus said. The other slave species are responding to our broadcasts. Most of them had their own resistance movements, just waiting for an opportunity. They're eager to work with us on rebuilding. Sarah nodded, remembering how the Vexari had tried to pit their various slave species against each other, never suspecting they were actually helping forge alliances. Make sure they understand our terms. No revenge killings, no destruction of Vexari technology or culture. We're here to build something new, not repeat their mistakes. The suns were setting on Crystallos, casting long shadows through the dissolving spires. In the gathering darkness, human engineers worked alongside their former fellow slaves, stabilizing crucial systems and beginning the long process of transformation. The quantum network that had once bound an empire would now serve to connect free peoples, its power turned to creation rather than control. Private message from Earthsite, Marcus said softly. They found a way to use the modified quantum technology to begin reconstructing the debris field. It won't bring back our world, but we might be able to build something new there. A memorial, or maybe even a new habitat. Sarah touched the burn scars on her neck, her own memorial to Earth's last day. Schedule a meeting with the science team. If we can rebuild from an asteroid field, we can rebuild anything. She looked at the crystallized form of High Commander Kexpa, forever frozen in his moment of realization. They thought breaking our world would break our spirit. Instead, it taught us how to become unbreakable. The quantum network hummed with activity as humanity and their allies began the work of reshaping the galaxy. They had spent 15 years learning, adapting, and preparing while their masters laughed at their primitive nature. Now those same primitive apes would lead the way into a new era. In the end, the Vexari's greatest achievement had been unintentional. In trying to subjugate humanity, they had forced them to evolve beyond anything they could have imagined. The Empire of Crystal had fallen to the species they had dismissed as animals, and the stars themselves would bear witness to what those animals would build from its remains. Sarah Chen, once a slave and now one of humanity's leaders, looked out at the changing world and smiled. The last light of day caught the dissolving crystal towers, making them glow like the dreams of a new future, one built not on conquest and subjugation, but on the indomitable spirit of all those who had learned to rise above their chains. Evolution, after all, favored not those who claimed superiority, but those who never stopped adapting, never stopped learning, and never accepted the limitations others tried to impose upon them. Humanity had proven that, and now they would help forge a galaxy where no species would ever again mistake technological advancement for evolutionary supremacy.